Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of a Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs.
And welcome everyone to our podcast. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. And every so often we bring a special guest to help illustrate what we're talking about. And we're bringing a person with a great story to tell, aren't we, Sharon?
Yes, absolutely.
Rebecca Bird from Peggy Williams Books. And
Here in Adelaide.
Here in Adelaide.
Yes.
And we hope to make some great connections with teachers and what they're doing in their reading and writing in their classrooms. Okay, so the title today is A Book Lover's Story, Great Read-alouds. Why are we exploring this, Sharon?
I'm sorry, that just turn it over to me. We sort of haven't really discussed the order of this. Here we go. Okay. So why are we talking about this today? Or, yes, why are we exploring the idea of having a book lover talking to us about great read-alouds is because we really know the importance that read-alouds play in young readers' lives. We know that there is huge motivation to come to an understanding about books, to love books, to enjoy richness of language, to think about people and places and other people's lives and things about the world that are all brought to us through wonderful literature and informational texts, not to exclude those as well. And they're important pieces that adults need to bring that to children. And as teachers, we really want to explore a bit today too about what we can do and how Rebecca's love for reading and her book knowledge can also really help us as teachers to be motivated to look for and explore and read more widely so that we've got a bigger range of things to be bringing to our students. But just a little bit of research before we move into that. So why read aloud is important, and I think we've done another podcast on read aloud, but to sum up some of the key research. So reading aloud has been found to be the most significant factor in the development of literacy levels of young children. So 2014 research with Kalb Van Ours. Even as a reading intervention strategy, it has huge benefits, and we've talked about some of those already, and you'll hear this as familiar things, so motivation, improving comprehension and reading development. And we might say, well, they're the very things that our students gain or children gain from read aloud, but they're also a really big piece for intervention. Sometimes we think of intervention, we're trying to fix up other things about children, but actually developing their motivation and their understanding around text is just as critical. And lastly, for those in Australia, a 2018 study showed that this was done through Murdoch University, Ledger and Merger, that children's attitudes towards being read to at home and school showed that they don't think they're being read to enough. And so their recommendations from that study was that, we really should be encouraging and supporting teachers to read to students, with greater frequency throughout all of primary school. We focus on those primary school years, but we wouldn't say just primary, would we? We'd say right through secondary. In fact, there are many studies done about the importance of the read-aloud in secondary schools, and not even with a whole lot of analysis. Just being read to brings us a whole lot of real richness. So anyway, there's my little research blurb.
So teachers need, some ideas on how to bring it into classrooms, what books to read. There's a whole lot of things we can explore here today.
Yes.
So
yes.
Sometimes it's not easy to integrate this with what they're doing because it's not something that's been on the agenda, but certainly can be.
Yeah. And I guess that's one of the things we do want to explore today too, is how books don't just fit into, they fit into any part of the day. There is, ways to, I think one of the underutilised ways that literature isn't used is to connect it to content areas where we can actually have story relating to concepts and ideas that aren't just to do with that are to do with specific concepts. Because
that's that motivational thing again, isn't it? Yeah. You really draw the kids in through a story, but then it leads into the non-fiction as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's
introduce Rebecca.
Welcome, Rebecca. We really look forward to having you on our podcast today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Fantastic. And so, Rebecca...
sorry, maybe we can just... I don't think we've even given any background to Rebecca.
No.
So we bring Rebecca here today, and she can do a little bit more information, but we know Rebecca through, and as teachers, she has been an incredible resource and support for us as what is your title at Peggy Williams Bookshop?
I've made my own title at Peggy Williams Bookshop. I will do anything that I need to do in my day-to-day job, but I guess the part probably that I'm most known for in schools and that I get asked is probably, I'd like to say maybe a literature consultant. So I can go to schools and whether it's working with teacher librarians or whoever's in the library, and more recently getting the kids involved in choosing as well. That's a big part of what I do. So I go out to introduce whoever wants to hear about books. Yeah,
I love that. A literature consultant, and we all need one of those in our lives. So right here in South Australia, we have amazing access to Rebecca and your Peggy Williams website, I think, is a really great resource too in the way that you've categorised books there for teachers to do some... I'm after a book about or a book to link with or in a category.
Yeah, so basically the Peggy Williams website is obviously so that every book, we sell to schools all around Australia. So, and anytime we get asked a question, probably more than once, that's when we start to think, how can we make it easier for people? Not that we don't like a phone call, you're always welcome to ring and that's fine. But so on our website, anytime if someone says, I need a book about mindfulness or I need a book about self-esteem or I need a book that's about a particular topic, be it picture book, non-fiction, information, novel. So all of our books, we try and have as many categories as we can that are relevant to that title so people can do a search on that. And it helps us as well. So if somebody rings, you don't have to think of the books off the top of your head. It helps us at the same time. But it means that that information is there for people.
Yeah.
And just going back up a step here, we remember Peggy Williams Bookshop years and years ago when Peggy Williams was actually there. And what a wonderful person she was who started the whole bookshop, and her love and passion for books and her knowledge. She practically knew every book that was going.
Peggy Williams celebrated its 33rd birthday this year.
Oh, brilliant.
I have only been there, 12 years next April. I never met Peggy. It's funny, I was talking to somebody today who came into the shop. I think, I don't know why, I was a junior primary teacher, so I was studying teaching, And it must have just been at the wrong time that I never got to meet her going there. So, yeah, everybody tells me how amazing she was. Every now and then when people come in, the highest compliment somebody can pay me is, "Oh, you've just done a Peggy with me." so yeah, I have big boots to fill. So
I just got to say, I just remember
this story.
walking into her shop. It was in Kent Town.
Oh, that was Children's Bookshelf.
Yeah.
So that was even before Peggy Williams' bookshop days. So that's,
And anyway, you'd walk in there. It was like going into a cave with walls of books that just towered above you.
And piles of books.
Piles and walls of books. And you'd walk through and you'd hear this voice in amongst there and you couldn't see anyone. And she'd say, "Now, what sort of book are you looking for?" And you'd be looking for this person.
The book was talking.
Yeah. And she'd say, "I've got just the book for you." She knew them. Like she just knew what to recommend. And you're just like that, Rebecca.
Yes.
Yeah, well, yes, I try.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah. Well, you've definitely, you are our go-to.
So, and probably a question is what really got you, what originally got you passionate about getting into?
It's a weird one. I guess I've always been a reader. So my memories of reading as a child are not actually that strong. Really, I do remember always reading.
Yep.
And I trained to be a teacher. I was a junior primary teacher. That was a very short-lived. Not because I didn't enjoy it, just because at the time that I was going into teaching, it was very difficult to get permanent work, and a job came up in a public library. Oh. So I worked in a public library for about 8 years. And then after that, I worked at another company that's not around anymore, but people may still remember, which was Bees Knees Books. So I worked there for about 8 years. And so there's always been books and a love of books. So I guess even from that junior primary teaching, that was picture books, my own reading as a child and a teenager, working in the public library, again, all about books. So it's just generally just built. And it's that, when you were talking about like Peggy's knowledge, it is the sort of thing that is just built up over your life. Yes. Like you can't actually teach that. No. Like not really. You have to want to get the knowledge, and to get the knowledge, you have to be willing to work to get it. It's not something you can just download into your brain. No. It's something that you just build up over time.
Yeah. And that's the important piece for us as teachers, or to think about that. We build that up, that knowledge about over time too, of the books that we're reading, so that we are bringing, because we can only really bring books to our students, especially as read-alouds, that we have read and loved ourselves, because without that, we don't know what we're bringing. We don't know, like, why are we bringing it? Yeah. Are we bringing it to fill in a gap, or are we bringing this? We don't have to know everything this is going to bring to children, but we have to be invested in it. We have to say, I'm bringing you this because, for whatever reason, but mostly because I loved it as a reader, and I know that this is something that will match with the students in front of me.
So when we, in our classrooms, we set up classroom libraries in addition to the school library, but having a classroom library and someone like you to go to, Rebecca, to recommend the sort of books that, I've got this particular age group and these are the sort of things my kids this year are interested in. You can help with that sort of thing too, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it is, again, I was thinking about that there, especially at Christmas time when our the retail side of our business perks up and people come in wanting the perfect present for their, grandchild, child. There really isn't a one book fits all for everybody, but there are definitely things that appeal to a broad range of readers. Yeah. So, and it is about introducing different types of books and, lots of, with our retail customers again, I've known a lot of these kids that have been coming in for years, so I love to see them making interesting choices and trusting me to try something different. Like I'll say, this isn't anything like you've read. This isn't anything like the things you've been reading, but I love it. This is why I love it, and I want you to try. So I love that.
Right there, what you've just said, Rebecca, is what we want to catch as teacher too. You know, as teacher, we want to be the one that our kids can come to and say, I'm looking for, or what next?
Yeah.
And for us as teacher to have knowledge enough to say, why don't you try? Why don't you? And when we've really built that repertoire of knowledge and experience with books, they too will trust us.
Yep.
So, I love that.
And you also have schools that bring in their students
We do.
as a class or
We do.
a few classes.
Yeah. So,
Do you have limits on that, or do you?
well, this year has been very limiting with us doing that.
course.
Yes, there are a few schools that have been doing it regularly, and it is an amazing thing because I go out to schools and, like I said, I either can just do a one-on-one with whoever's working in the library and just do regular buying. More and more, it's becoming popular to pick a group of kids, particularly particular year levels, or if you know that the year 6 and 7s aren't engaged, or the 3, 4s are sort of, not really knowing what to read anymore, I can go out, talk to those groups of kids. I take a massive amount of books with me, and then they're involved in the choosing. So they've got a bit of ownership. So I talk to them about the ones I like. Then they've got a lot of time to have a look around. Alternatively, as Phil said, we have some schools that bring their kids in. What's amazing about that is that they get exposed to a bookshop. Yeah. And that may be something that some kids don't get on a regular basis. And
or actually haven't had.
Yeah. And it is amazing. And the kids we have, it can be quite packed in there. Yeah. When they're listening, they're just silent. And they're amazing. Like, I don't think there have been any groups that sort of haven't really engaged in that listening to me talk or listening to me read a book. It gets crazy after when they're, roaming the shop, but that's a good thing. That's the sort of, you want that to be exciting. You don't want that to be silence then. You want them to be chatting about what they're looking for and this is what I like. Where are these books? This is, I want to find this one. So, it's amazing to see how excited they are to come in. So that's very rewarding.
Because I was at a school once where it was a disadvantaged area, and there was a boy in year 7, I might have told the story before, who didn't have any books at home. He didn't have many in the classroom, and had lost his access to the library through behaviour.
Yeah. No, because he hadn't returned his books.
Oh, because he hadn't returned his books. So virtually had no access. So to come to Peggy Williams' books as a class, and I think we did
with that,
with that school, was fantastic. Like they couldn't believe their eyes. All these books, and they were allowed to choose some, and added those to their classroom.
Really empowering when children are involved in that choice making. Of like, what do they want? We can say we can bring in a whole lot of books into a classroom library, but if there hasn't been, if children aren't represented in that, then how are they going to engage with that? Yeah. So, yes.
And when they come into the bookshop, do they generally make some pretty good choices?
They do. I mean, it's funny, they will often always gravitate to things they know they can't have. Not that, we don't ban books, but, we do sell through to high schools. So there's definitely going to be content that's not suitable for a primary school and for whatever reason, and that's absolutely fair enough. I think there should be, there's plenty of time. You're always going to have time to read that other stuff. So, and there's a good reason certain things aren't in a primary school library, but they'll find them and that's the book they'll put on the pile, and I'll say no. And they'll look at me shocked, and I said, there's so many other books, I'll find you something else. But that one you have to wait a little bit for.
And what about the really young ones? They choose...
Well, no. See, most of the, either book talks, when I go out to schools, we very rarely do it with the little ones.
Okay.
Only because they would choose everything.
Yes.
They're not so discerning.
Yes.
It's not that they wouldn't enjoy it or that it's not exciting. And I can, in Book Week especially, I can do all year levels. But when it comes to the actual choosing of books, they really don't have that concept of not choosing everything. So when they come in and they have, it's usually some of the books have been pre-selected by the teachers.
Yes.
Or they really do have serious limits, but they get very excited, the little ones.
And it's much more teacher input to what. And it's not that they don't have a choice, but they'll just run rampant. Whereas the older ones have a better concept of money.
And like if they're given a budget, because that's the other thing. It's not just an exercise in choosing a book. It's okay, this is how much money sometimes you've got to spend, and they work together. So if they've got a little bit left over, a pair of kids, they get to choose another book, and it's all, very equitable.
Yes, yeah.
So drilling down now into some authors and books, are there particular authors
Are you thinking this is a crazy question now?
Might be a crazy question. that are just inspiring, that you think, kids just love those authors?
I think it will. I mean, there are obvious ones. There's Ando, who's just got, I think he's got 7 series out at the moment. He's consistently popular. The Aaron Blabies are consistently popular, those illustrated novels. And, Andy Griffiths. And those are always very popular. Books that I really like, I think the author Jack Heath. Jack Heath is an excellent writer, I think, for, I don't want to say boys, but for readers that aren't engaged, because he's a very visual storyteller, and I find that reading his books is like watching a movie. So I think that for kids that don't really want that story that they have to really follow, this, you just sort of read it and you're just taken away and it's easy. Tristan Banks is an author that I really like. He's very funny. He writes 2 sorts of books. He writes the Tom Weekly books, which are very, very humorous, that I often will read bits out of those, because anytime you read, you want to sort of engage kids. If you read them something funny, you'll have them eating out of your hand.
Yes. But
he also writes some more serious books, sort of more deep and meaningful books. Morris Gleitzman, I mean, he's still perennially popular. I've met kids that have only ever read once and will just read it over and over and over again. They just love it. So I think he is a very easy author to read, but he writes about big things.
Yes.
Like Michael Morpurgo. Michael Morpurgo is another amazing English author whose books are deceptively simple, but are really good at exploring big things.
I like how you say that.
It's great having those authors write about those big things and still have that rich language, but still draw the kids in.
Yeah.
That's a real art, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And I mean, there's, there will always be new authors, and there are lots of, so many things that I like, and I could talk forever. The other author that I really, really like, and it's a genre that I really like, that I know a lot of people are hesitant to go towards, is verse novels. So Stephen Herrick is our probably most famous verse novelist, and Pip Harry, her Little Wave, which was just the Children's Book of the Year winner this year, that was a verse novel. I also think for kids that are less engaged in reading, to convince them to read a verse novel, because to explain it to somebody who's just listening and who may never have seen one, if you open up a verse novel, it looks like a book of poetry. But once you realise that each of those poems is like a little chapter, and it's actually telling you a story, and the sentences are short. And I used to say it was the guts of the story, and then I realised probably that's not the best description. It's the heart of the story. I think it just gives you, all the feelings and all the emotion, and it connects you really closely to the characters. And verse novels tend to write from different perspectives, so they're really good at maybe like in Little Wave there were 3 characters, so you get to hear each of their stories and how their stories combine. Steve Herrick is amazing at it. The Pip Harry one was amazing. They're full of really good feelings as well. Like one of my favourites is Pookie Alira Is Not My Boyfriend by Stephen Herrick. It is one of my all-time favourite books. Wow. It is just about, it's a small country town, and it's all the different kids have their own like voice in the story, and so do some of the teachers, but the essence of that story is just about community and kindness. And I think we've got so much good stuff coming out that really emphasises that. And for schools, that's what you want as a school culture. So if you can bring that in everywhere, and it's just very uplifting and very inspiring, I think.
By the way, we don't mind you talking forever, Rebecca. We've got plenty of time here.
We might have to rein me in.
No reining. No.
Yes, this might turn into 3 episodes.
I remember going on I went on a radio station once, and they gave us 10 minutes, and there's not a lot you can do in 10 minutes.
No.
So a podcast is a great forum for this. So,
I've lost my train of thought. But I was just going to come back to because this is what you're doing for us right now, in a sense, is you are book tasting.
Yes.
You're allowing us to some insights into books, and I think that's, as teachers, that's something that is a good practice for us to get into as well, is how we can introduce some types of books, or some a new type of book that they haven't come across before, new authors, or just talk about authors that we might have read one by, but then who are the others? So any other good tips for book tasting?
I guess I've seen different schools doing really interesting things. I've seen something, and again, I don't do a huge amount of social media, but I do find it's very handy to connect with authors. Authors are amazing at sharing their stories, I think, on social media, which I'm a big lover of stories behind stories as well.
Yes.
But that aside, also other schools, and I've seen a lot of schools sort of engaging with kids in regard to, like, if you look at it as a Netflix, so they've got like a Bookflix recommendations on their wall at school. So like you would if you logged on to Netflix, and it will say, these are the highlights. If you like this, then you might like this. And so they've literally got the covers, images of the covers on there, just so that's a visual that the kids engage with and they can see it, and then they can change that. So these little covers can come off, so you might then pick another book, and then if you like this, you'll like these, and these are what we're currently reading. So things like that. And again, that's, I think, kids engaging with other kids.
Yes.
And some schools, I guess, also use that peer sort of, not review, but if they know in particular classes they've got really good readers, they'll encourage those kids to talk about those books or create book reviews or recommend. Book trailers, a lot of schools are sort of trying to do book trailers just as a more visual way of getting kids interested in books. So
what do they look like, a book trailer?
A book trailer is like a little mini movie.
Okay.
So something like an iMovie, there's like I don't know if you could, I'm sure you could do it. So iMovie have a little...
a template type thing.
Yeah, but
that's right.
theirs is for a movie trailer. But
That's
there's
right.
nothing to say you couldn't use that for a book trailer.
Yep.
And again, someone like Tristan Banks, he had a really good trailer for Two Wolves. I mean, he's professional author, and somebody helped him do that. But it just gives you an idea of how you can, if you put music to it or sound or like another dimension to it, sort of makes it a bit more exciting. So
kids can do that themselves.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah.
Yes, because we want them being the ones to also be recommending and sharing out with others.
And if they love it. So,
Yes.
you're not going to ask anyone to recommend something they didn't like. So I think if they enjoy it, it's not going to be a huge task to figure out the best way. And, I guess they can come up with a lot of ideas as well. Like if they love a book, how do you think we can get people to read this?
Yes.
And I guess with the older kids, from grade 5 upwards, especially going into high school, they all listen to their peers.
Yeah.
Yes.
More than the teacher.
yes,
So that's a great thing to get them all.
Year 5-6 class I was working with recently, we would just do that on the day where it was, doing the book borrowing, their library, changing over their books. And before they put their books, returned them, everybody just sat around and held up books saying, this is what I'm returning today. It's about, and really books were traded and swapped right in that spot. Because actually many years ago, Russell in my year 4 class said when he went back to, I was asking, how do you find good books when you get to the library? And he said, that's easy. You always look in the return box because that's where all the good things are. So, yes, engaging kids in hearing about books. Like right now, the verse books, I have to say that is definitely a category that I want to explore more because I've only read one.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I didn't enjoy it. It's just that I thought, now, that's a while ago since I've read that now. Why haven't I got back to and why? And that would definitely be something I would want to bring as a read aloud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Connecting the read aloud to content areas, is that something that you...
Yeah, I mean, I think that for us is probably not, it's not that it's not a huge priority, but that's not the first thing I always think about. Every now and then I will read something and I think, oh, that fits perfectly with this, or that works with that. I always think there is a part of because we try again, with all the things we have on our website, we do have curriculum links for all areas of the curriculum. To be honest, and it might seem weird, we don't actually have a lot of links to English, because to me that's everything. So how do you pick which one? Because you can pick the areas, the books that you want for each year level. And there is something, I think, in every description of the curriculum about English about books should be read for pleasure. And I think, well, that's how it fits across everything, because that's okay. We can read things just for fun. So
That's right. So, and what about particular books for age groups, like for the little ones, middle primary, upper primary?
Yeah, and again, I think that comes down to different children and different expectations and different reading. We definitely, I mean, obviously we have books for everybody, and we can recommend for different ages, and there are things for everybody. I think the hardest thing is probably, I think it's that middle primary. I think there's a lot for young, and there's a lot of, like we were saying, the Andos and the bad guys, and there's nothing wrong with those. Those books make readers. Kids love books because of those authors. I think the biggest challenge is to find something else from there. And I think middle primary literature at the moment is the best it's ever been. I think there's amazing stuff out there. Like I would probably consider, I was always a bit of a YA reader. Like I loved the teenage stuff because it was very meaty and interesting, but I've just read so much really good middle stuff that
So to get those middle primary ones off the easier ones into something, what's a good stepping stones?
Well, like Tristan Banks, those Tom Weekly books I think are really good.
Okay.
Because they're still illustrated. So they still have some illustrations in those. They are broken up into short stories. It's not a novel necessarily, but it looks like a novel.
Yes.
It's the same characters. There's another more recent one, and I'm not going to remember who's written it, so I really apologise to the author, but it's Derek Dool, and that's really good because it's not it's still quite illustrated but not as much. So I think it's just a matter of, those little jumps, figuring out. And, the wimpy kids, I guess, as well. But, yeah, there's plenty around that have more text and less illustrations, and then bit by bit just figuring out. And that's what I always ask, what is it about that book you liked? Like what part of the story or what element? So then if you can find that element in another book, then we're willing to try something completely different.
Yes.
So a teacher could try and do that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a great resource to be able to do that because you've got such expertise at doing it, but a teacher could try and do that same sort of thing.
And I think a teacher does, in a perfect world, need to be a reader to do that, because I do think the only way you can do it is to know what's out there.
Yes.
So to at least, even if you don't, if you're a teacher, even if you don't read the whole thing, I think I read it something somewhere that you can't let kids think they've made bad choices. So if they keep choosing Captain Underpants, you can't make them feel bad about that. But the teacher can read a Captain Underpants, figure out what it is and why the child might like it, and then work on that. Yeah. So you don't have to read the whole thing, but if you read a little bit of everything that the kids in your class are reading, then you've got more idea what they're reading, and you think, okay, well, if they like that, then maybe we can try this. Yeah. But you have to be willing, I think, to read at least something.
Yeah. So because we really are the guide in their reading life. Yeah. We are the ones that are bringing to them for that year what next. Yeah. And that really is the big piece of it, isn't it? It's always the what next. Yeah. Yep. And when we're with a series, then we don't have to, the child themselves knows what next. But then when I get to the end of that, what next? I need, and even before I get to the end of that series, that getting into something else, whether it is a book, just the one book by a particular author. It might be that it's got these elements about it that match in with what I like, enough elements around it, but then also moving me into something new, somewhere that I haven't necessarily been before.
And the other thing I always say is that it's okay to not finish a book.
Yes.
That's not to say you can't give it a decent try, but I always tell kids when I do talks about books that when I was younger, I did feel that once you started a book, you have to finish it, because that's what you do. You start a book and you finish it. Yeah. But, as now that I'm older and there's only so much time in your life, life is too short to read something if you're not enjoying it. And I always say there will be times in your life that you have to read a book because you're studying it at school. So you have no choice in that. Yeah. But if you are reading a book for fun, it should be fun. So if what you're reading, you are not enjoying it, put it down, try something else. You might go back to it. I often say that it's sometimes the mood you're in. You might not be in the mood for something so serious, or you might want something more serious. So give it another chance, but don't feel bad if you don't finish it, because it's just not the right book for you right now. Yes.
Yeah. And having a number of books on the go is okay?
Yes, I do. I'm quite easily distracted with my reading, because I have a very good intention and I have very good plans. I find this year especially, I think I did a lot of book talks and that for me personally really guides my reading. I don't necessarily get to read as widely as I would like, because I know if I'm going to talk to a group of Year 6 girls, I need to have enough new stuff in my brain to be able to talk to them about that. And then if I'm, doing something completely different, I need to read, and it has to be new. Because I sell books, that's what I do. So the more current I am, the better for me. So I'm constantly reading for particular reasons, which is good. And it means that sometimes I read things that I wouldn't normally read. And especially this year, I tried to, when I talked to I did actually a video for a school because I couldn't go there in book week. So I tried to do more genres than I normally would, and just try and be a little bit more broad, because I know what I like to read, and that's what readers are as well, but that I like to also practice what I preach. And if I'm asking kids to sort of go out of their comfort zone with reading, then I have to be willing to do that as well.
Yes, and I think you've hit on another thing that we as teachers need to take on. We can't just be reading what we want to read. We need to read widely enough to be able to represent all of our class. Yep. So, but that doesn't mean that we can't be recommended books by those that I frequently had that happen to me, as a teacher, where children would recommend books to me and say, oh, you'd be interested in this, or do you usually read books like this? Would you like to try this? And I found that was such a wonderful way to become part of the reading community with them, so that it wasn't just me being the one that would make recommendations, that I would take up their recommendations.
I would imagine
just as much
in the classroom that would be amazing and essential, because even when I do it, I have kids coming up to me saying, have you read this? Have you read, oh, you should really read this. And, oh, no, I know you don't read fantasy, but you really should read this one. So, and they love just being, it's not helpful, like they love something, genuinely, and they want to share that.
Yes, yeah.
Going to really young readers, do you have stories of parents coming, before the children actually go to school, of getting their kids really motivated in reading books to them, and then the children taking up reading before school?
Yeah, no, I think, and again, it comes down to the parents liking the book. I always say, I can recommend picture books I'm a big believer in books that rhyme for those little ones, and I just think that engages them, that helps with prediction, it helps, so I was going to say, someone like Mem Fox will tell you that there's no better way to learn to read than just to read picture books. You don't need a reader to teach you how to read. No. So we do get parents wanting that and what they can do, and it's really just that reading. And it doesn't have to be a picture book. It can be a longer novel. Yes. Again, they have to know, obviously they know their kids, what sort of, if they still need pictures, if they don't need pictures. We do sell some simple sort of readers. But I'm sort of more in favour of things like, I don't know if you know the Elephant and Piggy books by Mo Willems.
Yeah.
Yes,
See,
indeed.
I always will steer people towards that because it's simple text. It's not necessarily easy language, but it's simple text. The illustrations are amazing because there's so much emotion and inference in that it is really good at helping read with expression.
Yes.
So there's all sorts of little things like that.
Because the little ones can have really big ideas.
Yes.
They might not be able to read the text really well or not at all.
Yeah.
But they can still have, through being read to, they can
Their
have...
listening comprehension.
And that's why it really
huge
varies
compared.
because if you have somebody come in and want a book for a 4-year-old, I always sort of ask the questions, what do they like? And what are their favourite books? Because you might have, a 4-year-old who hasn't had much read to them, whose, interest is still quite low, not low, but a very simple story with not a lot going on. But then you'll have some 4-year-olds that are ready for some much more detailed, complex,
more complex stories.
still a picture book,
Yeah.
but a much more complex story. So it depends on everything that's come before, I think.
Yeah.
And it comes right back to that, doesn't it? It's about the child.
Yeah.
It's about what they are, whether we're parent or teacher, like what is it? Where's the child with this? What's their interest? What's next?
Yeah.
What's right for them next? And they've certainly got, by asking them, that's a really important part of that. I think what we sometimes forget is that's part of students thinking about how to select books.
Yeah.
Is to think for themselves about what am I interested in? What do I like? So what am I looking for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I always say that it's very, I ask the question usually, who here likes to read for pleasure? Who doesn't? And then I ask the people that do like to read why, and the ones that don't like to read why. And it's usually things like, I'd rather be playing sport or computer games. But one child said to me, it's because I don't know where to start. And I said, that is an excellent comment because I understand that. You come into a bookshop like Peggy Williams' bookshop and it is wall-to-wall books.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're a reader, it's not hard because you're willing to try things, you pick things up. But if you're not a reader, where do you start?
Yeah, where's your entry into?
So that's where recommendations come in. I always tell people not to be scared to just pick up a book because you like the cover. That is what it's designed to do.
Yes.
It's designed to make you pick it up. That's not to say you'll borrow it or buy it or read it, but that's okay. And it's all of those skills. Once you're a reader, you know which authors you like, and you can find out easily which authors are like other authors, and you're willing to listen. But if you are just starting, it's very daunting.
Yes.
So that's one of the reasons.
Going exploring books.
One of the reasons we recommend a classroom library, because you start to have this community of books where the children in that classroom start to talk about the same books and start to recommend to each other. It's a fixed number of books that they can start talking about.
Yep.
Yeah.
So even receptions, year ones, year twos, having a rich classroom library where they're starting to talk about the books that are in that library.
Yeah,
Well,
because they'll be the ones that are being read to them,
Yeah.
and the books that they'll have entry points into that collection because it's a living part of their community.
And one of the baskets can be the books that the teacher has read to them, and the kids invariably go to that.
We'll head there.
Yeah.
Go to that basket first because
They've heard the story. They know they like it.
Yeah.
Yes.
it's their entry point.
Yeah.
So, what's your...
Oh, no, I was just I've been burning to actually just make a little connection to something you said before about how much time we invest in a book. There's Nancy Pearl. Have you come across her? She's an American librarian. And she has a book called Book Lust.
Yes.
And she says in her book that there's she regrets that she didn't keep a record of all the books she's read over her life because she said, really, it's like keeping a list of friends.
Yeah.
That it's knowing that there's been all these wonderful people and adventures and places in her life. But she came to that point of like, how much time do you give a book?
Yeah.
And she said, when you're young, she thinks, and so clearly she's talking about children who are into a chapter book, a longer book. She said, I think it's fair to give a book 50 pages because how can you know in the first page or so, she said it's too early to abandon it right from the beginning, but give it 50 pages. She said after you've turned 50, life is shorter. Your reading life is shorter, so you're allowed to subtract your age from 100 and read that many pages.
See, that's excellent advice. I'll go with that 50 for kids because I don't recommend they give up too quickly, but
yeah. So because it's that it is giving a book a chance, but also knowing that it can't be I'm not going to invest, because it is an investment.
It is, and that's time is short. Everybody's busy, even kids' lives are busy.
Yes.
And like I said, if we're reading for fun, there's a really good book, and I didn't have one. Like I have a little, for those of you listening, I've got a pile of books just to help jog my memory. But there's a book called The Creakers by Tom Fletcher that has one of the best openings of any book I've ever read. I don't have it.
Oh, you
That's
don't
the
have
thing. I didn't have it because I keep selling it. That's the problem.
And I don't have it either. I wish I could pull that out.
No, it's just it's quite ominous and it's quite creepy and it's just so good. And I've read it to like countless school visits and kids that come into the shop. I say, just read that and then then decide. And I've had some put it back, but I think they're just being stubborn. But yeah.
What's the name of that book?
It's called The Creakers.
The Creakers, yeah.
Yeah, by Tom Fletcher.
Okay.
Right.
So that's one. Just if you
add that
really,
to
really
the
want
blog.
a book just to get them in straight away.
Beginning
the one.
paragraph?
No, it's a prologue. So it's
Prologue.
actually quite a bit. It's probably 3 pages.
Okay.
But it's very good.
Oh.
Sorry, I don't have it. You all have to go out and find that book
Yes,
now.
I was just going to say, but isn't that great? We've all got something to go and explore now. But this bundle of books you have got in front of you, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Why these books?
Some of them are new. Some of them are... I've got that Pookie Lira Is Not My Boyfriend, the Stephen Herrick verse novel.
Yes.
Just because I think it is... I think every... probably year 4 class should... I think the characters in it are probably in year... I think it might be a year 5 or 6 class. And they're a 6 class. So I think year 4 or 5 could do this. And it's all about how one person's kind gesture can make them feel so happy about doing something nice for somebody else. And it's just that... It keeps ringing true in my head. Every time I hear of something else or read something else, I think, oh, that's like Pookie Lira. But the one book,
And that's the verse book, isn't it?
that's a verse novel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Verse
So
novel, yeah.
it's also laugh out loud funny in parts. And
wonderful,
it is very, very rare to get a book that will make you laugh out loud.
Yeah.
Like lots of books make me cry, but not many books make me laugh. But he does. He always will make me laugh. But it's not, silly humour. It's proper laughing humour that on the next 5 pages you might cry. He's one of those people that can make you go through all the emotion. But yeah,
wonderful.
laugh out loud. There's a policeman in this that goes and does talks to the students about sort of road safety and water safety, and it is hysterical.
What's the age group for that one?
On the back of the book, some of the books say 9, say the ages. This says 9+.
Yep.
So I'm a believer sometimes in a book, if you can wait a little bit, you might get more out of it. So, I mean, it's not a difficult read. So, a year 3 could read it.
Okay.
But I think if you're a little bit older, you just get the whole concept of it a bit better.
Yeah.
It's like the other book I've got here, which is, this is sort of the life changer book. The book that I think everybody should read is Wonder by R.J. Palacio. I know schools that study this in high school, which I think is maybe like, I think most kids these days would have read it by the time they hit high school. But again, I think if you can read it in year, 5, 6, 7, it's going to change your life, this book.
Right. Yep.
It's been a movie. Most people will know it. I remember I had an adult come into the shop one day. She said, oh my gosh, she said, have you heard of this book called Wonder? She's just read it, given it to her husband. I said, well, yeah, it's been around for a long time. I work in a children's bookshop. But it's one of those books that I think every adult should read because it makes you question what sort of person you are. It is all about, are you a good person? Could you be a better person? And we all think we're good people, but when it comes down to it, could we be better?
I
So-
like that. And we frequently talk about, writers write to help us learn more about ourselves, our world and others.
That's my big thing. I think I mainly read for pleasure, But my big thing for reading, and this is especially sort of, again, that middle to upper, is that reading gives us a glimpse into other people's lives that we might never, and it's that empathy.
Yes.
And I think that's, to me, why reading is so important, because it makes good people.
Yes.
If you read widely and you read about other people's lives, and you can look at somebody and think, oh, I don't know what's going on with them, but I know enough about the world to know that their behaviour might be affected by all this other stuff that's going on in their life.
Yeah.
And it makes you think a little bit differently. And I think that's the reason that I read, and that's the reason I want kids to read, is to just learn about the bigger world. Like, you know, everything in life, you know, comes from, you know, being able to be a better person.
Yeah.
And I know that seems very simplistic, or
No, that's big. Like, that's the bigness of it, isn't it? You know, that's the... And I think that's why it's important that some of these books become the read-aloud. So as a community, we can do that thinking and exploring and understanding together.
Yeah.
That's a bit of gold there, that whole piece there about, you know, how we change ourselves by having empathy with those around us.
Yes.
Fantastic insight there, Rebecca.
Oh, thank you. On a completely different topic, there's a book here about cockroaches called Your Birthday Was the Best. I often like to pull out a picture book with middle to upper primaries, because I don't think you're ever too old to hear a picture book, and they often look at me. And I was at a school during book week, and there was one kid there who didn't really want to be there. He had to be, and was a little bit restless, and that's fine. I have no issue. It's always my job. Like, I just have to, you know, convert them. I always say that when I ask if they're kids that don't like to read and they're sort of hesitant to put up their hand, I said, no, put your hand up. If you don't like to read, I want to know, because then I can find you something. So anyway, I read this book called Your Birthday Was the Best by Maggie Hutchins and illustrated by Felicita Sala, and it is all from the point of view of a cockroach who's gone to a birthday party. And honestly, I've read it to adults, and they're very disgusted. But he's saying how he had a great time, but all the people were screaming and not happy that he's there. But I read this book to a group of, you know, 5, 6s, and this boy thought it was the best thing ever. So it's just, sometimes it doesn't have to be a big, thick book. It can just be a book that makes you smile and makes you laugh, and you think, oh, that's made me happy. So that's a good book.
Because you can actually turn a child that's not been into reading at year 3 or year 4 or year 5, and suddenly they can make a switch. Have you noticed that?
One of my best stories ever to make me realise that why I do what I do. I was at a school, and again I asked the question, who likes to read? And there was one girl, she didn't want to be there. She was a bit grumpy, didn't like to read, was never going to find anything. So I do my bit, and then once they're all sort of looking at the books and wandering around, she comes up to me and she said, where was your bookshop again? And I said, it's in Walker. I said, but why do you want to know? I said, you don't like to read. She said, oh, there's books here that I want to read. So I left there, and everything was fine. 2 weeks later, she turns up to the shop with her mum in the car. Goodness. Her mum came in and said, I just wanted to come and say thank you. She said, you made me cry. She said, my daughter came home and she was so excited about books, and she's dyslexic and she does not like to read, and she's come home with this list of books that she's so excited about, and she's been carrying this list around for 2 weeks. So we had to come and see you, and she wants to get some of those books. So I thought, that's why I do what I do.
Wow.
She said, I don't know if you'd remember me. And I said, of course I remember you. I said, you're the one who doesn't like to read.
Yes.
So, that's why I do it.
Oh, that's a fabulous story.
And there's that, you know, it's books that make us readers.
Yeah.
You know, it's thank goodness we've got authors whose company we can be in.
Yeah.
Because Frank Smith always talks about that. You know, we learn from the company we keep. We learn to be a reader by reading. And when we have access to things that we want to read, that we choose to read. Here was that young girl, there were books she wanted to read. She was burning to read now. It wasn't just, oh, I'd like to. She's got mum there. We're buying these books because I'm burning to read. And that's really what we're trying to chase down for.
It is.
For our young learners, is to burn to read. You've We Are Wolves. Can you just... I don't know this one.
So We Are Wolves, this is a new one. So We Are Wolves is by Katrina Nanastad. She's an Australian author. This got a lot of hype, and I read this before it came out. So I'm in a very lucky position that publishers will send me books before they're released, and certain books get a lot of hype, and this one did. So this will appeal to readers of Morris Gleitzman. It is a story set at the end of the war. It is about Prussia, about a family who have to leave Prussia because it's being invaded by the Russians.
Yes.
And it's about the Wolfkinder.
Oh,
So
yes.
Wolfkinder, and that's what I love. I think I know a lot of things. And then I read a book and I realise I don't know everything. And that's okay. So this is about the Wolfkinder, which is sort of in the back of my head knew. So it was about children and family, well, basically children who had to live in the wilderness because they were separated from their families and they just needed to survive. So I was a little bit worried. A lot of things I read because I have to judge the content.
Yes.
Especially when it's a story that could have something in it that's disturbing or not going to be okay for everybody. And there's, I think, something on the back saying we had to do bad things, and I'm thinking, what is it? But it's not too bad. So don't be put off by that if you're in a primary school. It is fine for a primary school library. It's very engaging. It's a survival story as well. So if you think, I don't really like historical fiction, it's not just historical fiction. It is a story about family, it's a story about hope, and it's a story about survival. So it's got all of those elements in it as well, and it's a beautiful book. It's got a lovely cover.
It's gorgeous. It's very appealing.
And just one other.
This
one?
Yes, can you do that one as well as your one other?
Yes, the grandest bookshop in the world. This is another one. Massive hype. And when I said before that I like a story behind a story, this story behind this story is amazing. So the grandest bookshop in the world is written by Amelia Mellor. She's a teacher. It's her first book. It is set in Melbourne in a place called Coles Book Arcade. Now, again, I think I know everything, but I didn't know about Coles Book Arcade. So Coles Book Arcade was this amazing bookshop that was indeed the grandest bookshop in the world. Now, I'm not going to get the date right. I think it is 1893. So it is a real place. It basically took up like one block. So you think in Adelaide, if you think of something like Adelaide Arcade, so it was this massive shop. Mr. Cole was a very progressive thinker. He believed in people living in harmony. He believed in acceptance. In this giant bookshop, he had a tea shop and a spice shop, and he encouraged people to just come and sit and read, and he had all people from different cultures. He didn't even expect his children to go to school. They got to choose if they wanted to go to school or if they would be homeschooled.
Yes, yeah.
The characters in this story are all real. So it is Mr. Cole and it is his children and it is his family. It is a fictional story and it has elements of fantasy in it, but everything in it is real. To look at
blend.
It is, and I love a book that you can actually. So if you were looking at this book in the classroom, you can bring up pictures of the real place, and the museum in Melbourne have artifacts that he had a chicken that laid eggs, and inside the egg there was a lolly. He made these amazing medallions that had beautiful messages of peace and hope that he would just give out randomly. And so
how have I never heard of this man?
That's what I mean.
This bookshop.
It is amazing. And he at some point in his life decided he needed a wife, so he advertised for her in the paper and got one. So his story is amazing. So for me to tell the story behind the story, that's almost enough to get the kids in to read something like that. Because it is so interesting. But it's a little bit dark, not too dark. I would say, you don't like to compare everything to Harry Potter, but everything gets compared to Harry Potter. But if kids can cope with that level of sort of darkness in Harry Potter, they'll be okay with this. Right. But it's not what I expected. I didn't expect it to be quite so dark.
Okay.
But yeah, and again, it's a beautiful book.
Yes, I'm fascinated too.
Just speaking of Harry Potter there,
Yes.
a lot of kids get into reading because of Harry
They
Potter.
do.
What's after that for some kids?
Oh, I mean, we've got a lot now. I guess the biggest one is the Nevermore series by
Yep.
Jessica
Yes.
Townsend. That's
Yes.
massive.
Right.
And there's an amazing, again, it's not out yet, it's coming out next year, called Amari and the Night Brothers. And I can't remember, I want to say it's B.B. Alston, so I don't know if that's right, but it is amazing. His story is amazing as well. So he basically got this book deal from, they do like a Twitter pitch. So
yes.
in a particular time, you can go onto Twitter and pitch your idea for a book and someone will take it up, and someone took his idea. So he is a black American man who felt that there were not enough black kids in fantasy stories. So this is about a young girl, 11-year-old girl from a disadvantaged neighbourhood in America who finds herself involved in this supernatural world. Her brother's gone missing and he was involved in this particular society that she knew nothing about, and she gets introduced to it. But but it has definite elements of Harry Potter in it.
Yes.
Okay.
As I'm reading it, there are certain things, and that's not a bad thing, because that, when we're talking about how do kids get connections, it's a familiar feeling when you read it. It's not the
Yes.
same story, but it is a
No.
familiar feeling, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
'Cause-
Ooh, something to look forward
Yeah.
to. Ooh,
Yep.
lovely.
Because series are a really good way of engaging kids, aren't they?
They are. And it's that trust thing.
Yes.
Yep.
And we'll often find but just in general, like a first book in a series will come out and it might not do amazingly well. As soon as the second book comes out, even adults and librarians think, I'll get those. It's like they trust it now that there's more than one. So, but yeah, it is definitely, series are predominantly what is around for kids.
Yep.
Yeah,
I think
more
standalone books are the hard, and that's what I try and talk about more, I think, when I go out, are those standalone ones.
Yes.
Those
Yeah.
not harder to get your hands on, but the ones that are not so obvious, not
Yes.
so in your face, that you might not take off the shelf because you're looking here and you're looking at this series. And
And
so
there's
I-
some
Yes.
there's some
Yeah.
real gems there, aren't there?
Oh,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes, you
amazing.
don't want to miss the...
I think we need Rebecca to have a permanent spot on our podcast.
Yeah, I'm without a doubt.
Anyway,
And I can't see her shaking her head.
no.
well, yeah, any excuse really.
You have got one more book. Have we got time for
Yeah.
one more book?
I've got a few, but I'll talk about this because sometimes I have to read things for certain reasons, and I had to read this book called Darwin's Dragon by Lindsay Galvin, and it is one of those really good books. Again, if we're looking at kids who maybe are not engaged with fiction but love non-fiction, this is based on Darwin's expedition on the Beagle to the Galapagos. So the characters in
Wow.
this book are real. So Charles Darwin is a character in them,
Yes.
and Sims Covington is the main character in this story. So Sims Covington was like Charles Darwin's cabin boy.
Yes.
So this is what happens if they were involved. It's fictional.
Yes.
So if they were involved in a very bad storm, Sims Covington finds himself stranded on a particular island, and what he finds on that island is a dragon and dragon eggs. So what would have happened if Darwin brought back dragon eggs from the Galapagos?
Wow.
I'm in.
So
I'm in.
yeah, and
Yes.
there's real people, like I said, all the way through. It is an adventure story, but it's also a bit of an ethical story because Sims Covington does not think the eggs should go. He thinks the eggs should stay. Darwin doesn't believe they're dragon's eggs. He doesn't, but Sims has seen the mother dragon, so he knows.
Wow.
But Charles Darwin just believes that it's a reptile and it's just a big lizard, and it's a lizard we don't know. And yes, it's exciting, but it's not a dragon. Yeah.
Oh, look, that is like, how can you not? And you haven't even opened the book,
No.
and you've sold it to
Yes.
me. It's
That people
that's
do-
the power of
And you have to like
knowing,
it. And
yeah.
people say to me, how come you don't even have notes? How can you know that? And I always think that I'm not going to talk about books I didn't like.
No.
So those books don't stay in my head.
No.
So books that mean something to me stay
Yeah.
in my head. Like I said, I might not always remember the exact details, but I remember the feeling. I remember, the main bits of it, the bits why I liked it.
Yeah.
And so many books are made into movies, so that
Yes.
people see them in that way. But there are so many books that aren't made into movies that
Yes.
are whole worlds there that
Yeah.
there to be explored.
Oh,
Yes.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's what all of this is about, isn't it? It's about exploration of, like this is, as we said, exploring worlds, ourselves and others.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Now,
All right, you're going to wrap us up, Phil?
we're going to wrap up and we're going to go on to some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Oh, right. Okay.
Now, Rebecca, what was your favourite book as a child and why was that book your favourite?
Oh, I don't remember having a favourite. All I can remember is the books that I remember would be Nancy Drew, Trixie Belden, Enid Blyton. That's what that's books that I remember. No particular book.
No, but series.
Just loved reading.
Yeah, and mysteries. I really loved mysteries. So
Okay.
Wonderful.
What was your most interesting school bookshop story?
I think the story about the
Yeah.
girl who came in, that was probably my best one. But I'll just quickly say, only because we were talking about the importance of being read to, when I was in the public library, one of my jobs was the preschool storytelling, and the library I was in, the children's library, was separated by a wall from the rest of the library, but there was no roof. So voices carried over, and patrons just used to have to deal with that. But the reading, sort of the newspaper reading area was on the other side. And I remember one day after doing it, a very old gentleman came up to me and he just said, "I want to say thank you." He said, "That was lovely listening to you read this morning." So I thought, there you go. That just shows, again, you're never too old to have someone read you a story.
Oh, beautiful.
Fantastic.
No, you're right.
What books do you remember being read to as a child, and any significant books or
I
not
think
really?
this all the time, and I don't.
No.
And I know I must have been because,
Yep.
I've got a good family. But my most significant being read to is by my Year 7 teacher. His name was Mr. Baker. And I remember being read, and I can't even tell you about these books, but I've just, again, it's that feeling. So it was The Weird Stone of Brisingamen was one, and I think The Silver Sword.
Oh, yes.
So again, I don't,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I can't tell you anything about the stories.
No.
But that's just this memory that I have, and that I think of him a lot because I think so many teachers, once they hit Year 7, don't read to their kids,
And
and
do you
that's
think-
my biggest memory.
Did you think that changed the kids in that class, their relationship with the teacher because of that?
Yeah, I think
reading?
so.
Yeah.
It's funny though because I don't read fantasy, and they're the
No.
books that I remember. That Weird Stone of Brisingamen, so it didn't help me with that. But yeah, and like I said, it's not often the book, but it's a feeling, and that's I guess what you get when you share books with kids as
Yes.
well. They might not remember the story, but they'll remember how they felt
Yeah.
when you were reading it with them.
Yes. Yeah. Because it is about relationships.
Yeah.
And we've kind of talked about these next two a little bit, but maybe it might jog another memory.
Yeah.
What 1 to 3 books had the most influence on you?
Okay. Well, I probably did because I would say Wonder is one of
Yes.
Yes.
is probably the book
Yeah.
that really did. And I remember the day it came that I've still got my reading copy of it, and I had someone come in the other day who probably would have been 20, maybe not 20, yeah, maybe 20 years ago. She said, or however old Wonder is, she said, "I still remember the day you came in and told us about that book and how I went home and read it." And yeah, that's probably the biggest book. And the one book that it's out of print, but made me really love books that rhyme would be It's the Bear by Jez Alborough. I love that
There's
book.
an author that
I love that book so much, and I get this thing. Again, I used to read it in the 8 years or something that I was at the public library doing storytelling. I would read it quite a lot, and at the same point, every time the kids would go, "Oh, it's a rhyming book." At the same point, so it's just got that perfect rhythm and that perfect rhyme that and it's out of print, so it's devastating.
Oh.
Yeah,
But you
I
can
know.
still get it somewhere, do you think?
No, can't get it anymore.
Oh,
And you-
I've got
Second hand copy.
Yes.
No, I don't even have my own copy. But there is a
Oh,
brand new one by a different author called There's a Bear on My Chair
Okay.
by Ross Collins.
Yep.
That is nearly my new favourite book.
Ooh.
It is, again, I sold my last copy today, so I didn't have one to bring.
Oh, you thought you were going to say you sold your life for it
No,
there for a moment.
I'm not going to sell my life for it. But it's inched its way to my all-time favourite picture book just because the language is good, the rhyme is good, it's got humour, everything you sort of want that you're guaranteed it will
Yes,
engage the
yeah.
kids. Guaranteed.
Oh,
So
Brilliant.
I think a good idea will be to list these books and authors in the notes on this podcast so that people can just refer back to them. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, they'll be in the blog.
Or in the
Yeah.
blog.
Yeah.
Or both. Yeah. And what children's book would you most
Well, this is
love to fall
my
into?
question.
Yeah.
Is there a children's book that you would love to fall into?
I did think about this. And interestingly, it's not any that I've spoken about, and it's only because there's an author called Hilary Mackay. She's an English author. And she wrote a series of books about a particular family, the Casson family. They were just realistic fiction with quite a bit of humour, and each book sort of focused on a different family member. And I loved that family. Like I loved them.
Yeah.
And it's that sort of series that once you know there's no more, you get really sad because you're never going to be able to visit them again. So I would like to fall into any of those just so I could meet that family because they were really good.
Oh,
I've just got a million more questions, but we'll have to have another podcast or more.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, when a teacher reads a book, do they have to be a really good reader to engage those kids, or is it just about just reading it?
Oh, well, that's funny because I just read a book called Echo Quickthorn and the Sky Pirates, and there's a particular scene in that that I thought it would make a massive difference depending how you read it. Yeah. So I do think that if you can put something into it, because it does help and it is more engaging. And I do think that you probably need to read a book before you read it to the class, like all the way through, so you can just get and I know it's not always, easy, even if you just read it the night before, like the chapter you're going to read or the pages you're going to read, just because I do think there are certain books that will suit a more enthusiastic read.
Just keep a chapter ahead.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, we have to wrap up, but thank you so much, Rebecca, for being on today. And
it's my pleasure. I've just seen what the time is. Goodness.
Oh, my word. Oh, and Rebecca's here after work. I mean, she works in a bookshop all day. So here she is after work. Might not be after work for you, but Rebecca, your passion, your insights, your joy, your generosity as a literature consultant is just what we need. We thank you so much for bringing all of that and more to us, and bringing books as well. It's you and your books. You're a package.
It is. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, and jump onto the Peggy Williams bookshop website where people can either make contact with you or see more about
everything we do.
And
we're always there to take your calls. So if you've got a question you think it's weird and you don't really want to, don't ever be scared. There's no stupid questions.
No, I know. And you're marvellous. I don't know how many times I've rung, Rebecca, I'm after a book about, or for this age group, can you make any recommendations? And right there, 30 seconds later, I've got 3 titles and we're away. So, no, we really value all that you've given us today. So
lovely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for all the work you do for schools and for children and teachers.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you, everyone. And signing off from on our podcast. I was going to say website, but podcast. And see you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.